I will start the recording. I have now done so. As I understand it, the presenters have been informed about this, and it's no problem. So with that, we will hear today a webinar on Research Data Alliance, RDA, and Sweden in a global context, opportunities, experiences, and future engagement. When I started my position as a director of S&D a year ago, almost exactly, I had only a vague idea what RDA was. I have since then learned quite a bit about RDA, but I still, before this webinar, wanted to check if there was a very short description available on what RDA is on the webpage of RDA, and I found something on a page called RDA in a nutshell, which was a slide deck of 31 pictures, but there was a quite good description of RDA. RDA is an international member-based organization focused on the development of infrastructure and community activities that reduce barriers to data sharing and exchange. So I very much look forward to learning more about RDA from our RDA experienced crowd today. We will soon be listening to when you present your different thoughts and experiences of RDA work. Because S&D as an organization, of course, wants to facilitate a stronger RDA engagement in Sweden. How can we do that as an organization? How can we benefit from RDA engagement and RDA outputs in Sweden? And what can we contribute to the RDA collaboration? So without further ado, I give the floor to the moderator of today, Gustav Nilsson, who is also a senior advisor for S&D. Take it away, Gustav.
Thank you very much, Eva. It's lovely to see so many people here today. Here is the program of the day, and I'm immediately going to announce that there is one small change. We decided that Chris Erdman is going to speak once instead of twice, so both his talks will be baked into one and will follow on Hilary Hanaho. As you can see, we are very happy to have Hilary Hanaho with us today, who is Secretary General of the RDA and who will explain what is the RDA. This is followed by Chris Erdman on joining an RDA group and on his experiences of RDA engagement, then a Q&A. Followed by examples of RDA engagement by Volmar Nyberg Åkerström and Ida Taberman, then a Q&A, and at the end a panel with Sverker Holmgren, Ida Taberman, and Volmar Nyberg Åkerström. I will introduce the speakers in connection to their respective points. Before I hand over to Hilary, I'd just like to take the opportunity to say something about research data myself. It might be nice once in a while to remind ourselves that research data is in fact the foundation of humanity's knowledge. The amount of research data in the world is increasing by orders of magnitude, and it is only by preserving and reusing all this research data that we can achieve the knowledge gain out of academic and other research that will allow us to advance all of humanity's other aims, such as evidence-based decision-making in policy and practice. Having said that, it is now my pleasure to hand over to Hilary Hanaho, who is, as I already mentioned, Secretary General of the Research Data Alliance, and we are very happy that you are with us today, Hilary.
Thank you very much. Gustav, I'm sharing my screen, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, let me just do that. So thank you all. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, of course, to open this webinar. Eva, I loved the fact that you went to look at our website and everything, and I was thinking that maybe in a nutshell, we don't say about the strong roots that we actually have in Sweden, and that the Research Data Alliance its first meeting was held in Sweden in March 2013. And we were very lucky to go back there to celebrate 10 years, hosts of Chalmers and, of course, many of the other Swedish institutes. So Sweden has a very special place in the Research Data Alliance's heart. So yes, and here we are 11 years on, and I'm going to tell those of you who don't know anything about it, and maybe you've heard a bit of this before, but I will give you some insights into the Research Data Alliance. I always like to start with the values. These values, interestingly enough, were coined, I suppose, very shortly after our launch in Sweden in March in 2013, and they stand the test of time. We've changed one thing in these values since they were established and agreed by the community, because as Eva said, this is a community-driven organization, a global community-driven organization, bottom up, as we like to say. And the vision is, of course, that we can share and reuse data across different technologies and disciplines and countries to address the grand challenges of society, but also smaller, big challenges that we hope then will lead to the resolution or the support of grand challenges. And how do we do that? Well, we do it through building the social and the technical bridges to enable that vision. And building social and technical bridges means not just, and you'll hear more from Chris and Volmar and the others afterwards about some of the bridges or the nuts and bolts for that bridges that we are building from a technical perspective, which is truly important, but also the social aspect, which we put a big emphasis on in the Research Data Alliance, because making those connections, finding peers, finding people who are struggling with the same challenges or can share their experiences and their lessons learned is really, really important. So the social and the technical bridges are fundamental. And all of that is done under the 6 guiding principles. And they are, of course, that everything we do is open, it's consensus driven, it's inclusive, and that's the one that we actually changed. We used to call it balance, but we mean inclusive in terms of the whole world, irrespective of where you are, who you are, what gender you are, etc. Harmonization in the sense of trying to reduce the silos. That's a lot about what RDA is, yes? That's why we work across disciplines and countries and technologies to try and ensure that there is a reduction of the duplication of efforts and silos. Everything is community driven and non-profit and technology neutral from the point of origin, or in the sense that everything that the community does and makes available for others to take up or to implement or to use or to take advantage of must have no technology lock-in. That's what we mean by that. And we like to talk about the Research Data Alliance as a family, because we have these individuals who are over 14,500, but they are the people who actually work together to create these technical bridges, if you like, through some mechanisms that we have. But of course, organizations are fundamental to an organization like the Research Data Alliance, because while it's the individuals who give their expertise and everything is done on a volunteer level, actually it's the organizations, of course, that will be implementing or taking up these best practices or standards or guidelines. And then we have nations or regions, as we like to call them, because of course we're a small organization, but we have huge global reach and huge global aspirations. But we couldn't do that without champions or ambassadors or regional support, so that we know who we should be connecting with on the ground. Of course, there's also a linguistic aspect to this, not maybe in your country as much as maybe in others, but it's important as well that we, if you like, speak the language in many ways. So we have regions as well with whom we interact. And just want to show you this because to give you an understanding that actually almost 70% of our members are from the academic and research, if you like, profession or organizations. And that makes sense. That's what the type of focus we have had since we were launched in 2013. And this was, by the way, the initiative was launched by, at the time, the European Commission, the National Science Foundation in the US, and the Australian government. We have, as you see, we have expanded to many other countries and also support in terms of funding from other countries. But the idea was that it was a place where the community could come together and work and find the solutions in a bottom-up way. We have no political parameters or limitations, or even any political or funder-based governance in RDA. It's a specific choice made by our original founders so that we could be an independent bottom-up organisation. As you can see, we're quite Northern Hemispheric heavy, which also maps and follows a little bit the original funding and a lot of the work that was done. So we have quite a significant community in Europe. We almost half of our community are based in Europe, if not slightly more, and of course then North America. But we're doing a lot of work in this 5-year strategy to ensure that we become really truly global and find those ambassadors and champions in the Southern Hemisphere so that we can work more together. I think I'll talk a little bit more about this afterwards, if I'm not wrong, Chris, about how RDA works, but we have 3 very simple mechanisms. Working groups, they have a dedicated lifespan, they work together, have a deliverable comes out, is produced or processed or approved in the same way in which a standard would be. We actually were set up on our processes and procedures follow the Internet Engineering Task Force, which of course is a standards body, and we purposely made that choice so that we could have a robust process in place, but we're not a standards body. And then we have interest groups, which are more broad. They obviously look at topic areas. They produce some very important outputs as well, and often spin out and off into working groups to do a dedicated piece of work, and they can last as long as they're valuable. And finally, we have communities of practice, which at the moment in RDA they look exclusively on disciplinary aspects. So we have one on agricultural data, and we're just starting one now on earth and environmental sciences. A tiny sample of the outputs, just to help you understand a little, to try and put what groups produce into context. One, it would be, of course, the global Open Research Commons. They have come up with, I don't know if someone will talk about this afterwards, but they actually have a working group which have produced these essential elements, if you like, or attributes of Open Research Commons, which also, by the way, can map to thematic as well as, if you like, national level research or science commons. And they have an interest group because, of course, this work goes on. And now there's a new group starting around applying this work, if you like, from the Global Open Research Commons to health data collections and the health data spaces. So this is an example of a group and an output that they have, and you can see a snapshot of it there. But the idea being that they are, if you like, anyone who may be thinking about setting up a thematic or an commons, even institutional one, can look here and gain and benefit from the work that has been done, or the if you like, the activities that they have done to collect these essential elements and how, if you like, to approach them. This is an example that I give many times, but I think it's a really important and clue one of RDA because of this gives you a really good example of harmonization. When RDA was started, the Data Seal of Approval and the World Data System had 2 certification systems for repositories, and they were similar but not quite the same. And repositories were a bit challenged as to understand, well, which one is better and what one should we use and which is more applying to mine. So under the auspices of RDA, they set up a group and they came up with the one set of certification requirements, thereby reducing the, if you like, the standards in the world by 1 and making things more simple for the repositories. And not only did they come up with these, if you like, guidelines, but they actually, this CORTRAS seal is now the legal entity or that supports this work. So we're quite proud not only that we were able to reduce the number of standards in the world by 1, but we also had a hand in the CORTRAS seal. Of course, the FAIR principles come from many of our members were involved in that, but the FAIR principles, as you know, are very important nowadays. And we see the difference actually because they're quite common, I would say, commonplace in the Northern Hemisphere, but the work that has been done in the Northern Hemisphere and by many of the RDA groups has been very helpful to the people in the Southern Hemisphere who are, if you like, maybe have less resources to implement them and had less chance at the same time. So now they are able to take the fruit of the labor here. And of course, in hand with the FAIR principles came the CARE principles, which also stemmed from work through the RDA and the Indigenous Data Sovereignty Interest Group. But I think what I'd like to focus on here is that when the FAIR principles came out, this was a little challenging for the Indigenous data community or the Indigenous communities, because their knowledge, they wanted to make sure there was a human element to this FAIR. And FAIR, of course, is to support machine readable, and as well as human, but machine readable data. But the CARE part, my mind, is important not just from very obvious Indigenous data sets, but actually for all data, because the idea of the ethics and the responsibility, the collective benefit, and who has the authority to control, while very much in Indigenous knowledge, importance, it actually has a huge importance for the globe. And it was really nice to see the CARE principles cited in the UNESCO Open Science recommendations, which have been, if you like, accepted and approved by countries all over the globe. So they're just a tiny fraction of RDA's contribution, but you'll hear more about them afterwards. I want to talk about just one more thing, the community meetings, because you might say, well, that's great, but it's all online and things. So how do the community get together? Well, they come together in these meetings, and the idea of the community meetings in RDA are like working meetings to advance the work, to inject new ideas to the community, and also to showcase the activities and the outputs that the community has produced. So we have them twice a year, and since COVID, of course, we made a choice to have one fully hybrid or fully virtual, which is usually the meeting that takes place in the first 6 months of the year, and then the second part of the year, it will be somewhere around the world, but in a hybrid format, which is a very challenging event to run. So now, in the 7th to the 11th of April, we have our fully virtual meeting, and the focus of this is data for emerging technologies. I won't talk about it today because my time is up, but we're doing an awful lot of work around AI, and also the quantum AI and the data piece. And we believe that the community has a lot to say and could really support that. So there'll be some focus on AI and data for and the quantum in this particular plenary, along with all the sessions that the groups are having. And then, of course, as I said, we have a hybrid meeting later this year. And these little cuddly people or little cuddly animals will give you an insight into where we are going. So we have International Data Week, where RDA will have its plenary meeting within the framework of a 4-day event, which we organise every 2 years with our affiliate members, the World Data System and CoData. And it's hosted by our Australian partners, the ARDC, the Australian Research Data Commons. It will be online, but it's a great opportunity to actually, get immersed and get involved with other parts of the community as well as the RDA. And I believe that eResearch Australasia is happening there afterwards as well. And with that, I'm going to stop and thank you, and let the others give you more of a deep dive into the Research Data Alliance and how to get engaged with it. But I'll be staying with you and very happy to answer any questions later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Hilary, for this great introduction to the RDA and everything that is going on under its big umbrella. Next, we go straight to Chris Erdman, who is the head of Open Science at the SciLife Lab.
Hi, Gustav. And so thank you. If you can load the slides maybe in the background.
Here we are.
Yeah, one quick connection to make here, Hilary, too, is that thanks to S&D, we also have, and we've made the connections with RDA on the PID strategies and policies and recommendations work. So that is, if anyone's interested there, that would be a great to make those connections. But there's definitely a Research Data Alliance connection there as well. So I just, next slide. I just wanted to make this approachable, RDA approachable, and maybe talk about this through my journey through RDA. And to start, I think one important place is you can join RDA in the various groups. This is how I started. We had an open science group, and just like a community in astronomy that I was part of initially. And members of that group were part of like the early days of starting RDA. I remember I didn't have a travel budget at the time, and I couldn't go. So I lived vicariously through them. So, this number of names like Bob Hainish, who I can make another connection too with what Hillary said, is that we also have fun. So those community events, we have fun on one of those events, and one of them, Bob Hainish played piano. So, we at the end of the day, RDA is about the people, I think. Like I've made a lot of great connections in RDA around the world. But it started with just very minimal things, which is joining those communities, monitoring, and working through my own community of sort of interacting with RDA in the way that I could do at the time. But then I did have the opportunity to go to one RDA in Berlin. And the way that it sort of interacted then was I started joining sessions that aligned with what I was going to do. And at the time I was involved with library carpentry. So I was the director of library carpentry, and it made sense to sort of interact with certain groups. And one of them was the libraries group. And because of, I think, how welcoming we are in the community, I had conversations with them, and they said, you sound like you really could do a lot with this group. How about becoming a co-chair? And that's, that has a process in itself where we interact with RDA and involve people in the groups, but it really kind of starts off in those levels of, your engagement with the group and where you can take some of these groups. And so with that group, the libraries group, we actually did launch this worldwide initiative to do these 10 things guides for groups. And it really involved a lot of people around the world, and it was an outcome as well as what Hillary said, that gets published, through your sort of community. So you can interact through the website, you can interact through, joining these online sessions, but you can also attend an RDA, and that really allows you to start forming really close connections with groups, and maybe potentially joining as a co-chair and leveraging it that way. The other side of things is, that again, that online forum mechanism and engaging maybe separately with co-chairs. I have another example, which is the SHARC group, which is the Rewards and Recognition group, which is a great group I've been working with for many years. We just published some outcomes as well, some papers around, like what we found as far as rewarding some of the open science that you can do. So you really form great, bonds with people working on these projects. But how I got involved was I just started asking questions to them. And ultimately they said, hey, why don't you join our effort? And so I hadn't even met them in person, and we formed that connection sort of online as well. So that was one other way that it happened. And in similar fashion, you don't need to become a co-chair. You can get involved with a group. So the data discovery group was another one where I had a lot of feedback to provide. And they were working on a report, a white paper, and I just provided a lot of suggestions, feedback to them. Ended up being an author, but never a co-chair, because again, you can only spread yourself thin so much, be on so many different groups or projects. So that's another thing of thinking about how you can manage your time in RDA, because there's so much going on. Hillary mentioned there's 14,000 people. So you can imagine that can get overwhelming quite fast. So, one way to think about how does it apply to your own work, and then managing it maybe locally with your community of like, who is part of this group and who is part of this group, and working together in that sense. So like managing your time. one other thing I would mention here is that in joining sessions, sometimes you have these conversations on the side, and sometimes groups say, let's do something together. And that was one way that we sort of formed a Birds of a Feathers session, and ultimately formed a group called PIDs and Tools. But one way to go forward too is to say, present this idea to the community and say, is this worth moving forward as a group? And getting that sort of buy-in and then moving that forward. But you can also have sort of those side discussions with interested parties to form something. I also had the advantage of being in the Funders Forum. So I worked at the Michael J. Fox Foundation and joined the Funders Forum. And I think one thing is to sort of help with the like some of these groups seem very mysterious. And I would say at the end of the day, we're all very approachable. I think you'll find that in RDA, you can actually approach all these, different sort of communities and say, I'm interested. Sometimes, some of these communities are for particular groups, like the funders, but everyone in that group is pretty approachable. So if you would come to me and said, I'm interested in the Funders Forum, I think any one of us would have started talking to you about what happens, what do we talk about there? So I think, again, approachability is something to keep in mind, that you can approach people and talk about these various groups. And the same goes for the organizational assembly. So I've worn the hat of being on the organizational assembly. And a lot of the time we actually share what's happening across RDA in that group, talk about sort of wider RDA things. So Hillary will talk about that as well. But again, all of us are approachable. I think that membership allows you to sort of have that greater view of RDA. And that's something to consider in our community too. In Sweden is, who wants to become an organizational assembly, but it's a nice way to get sort of that overarching view, which Hillary was sort of providing and connecting with people as well. But again, everyone on that group is approachable. I suppose the last thing I would say is that I also sort of mentored. It's still in a way sort of mentor. So like the research, the libraries group is actually looking for co-chairs, and they put out a call for that. So if anyone's interested in joining the libraries group, it happens to be, I think, one of the biggest, if not the biggest group in RDA. And, Hillary knows this, been working with that group to sort of help with the like wider reach with the community as well, like what she talked about. So that tends to be a very diverse group. But the other side is mentoring individuals, and that was another sort of side that I had, is sort of working with an individual, sort of becoming an ambassador and helping them put together an application to be part of that process. Was another sort of role that I had, again, it's about the people and mentoring and just connecting and helping each other. So, if that's another thing that you're interested in, sort of being more of that ambassador role, then that's another sort of way to reach out. But I just wanted to mention all the different pathways. The second slide really sort of captures that in more of a nutshell, but there's different ways to interact and grow within RDA. And I hope that helps all of you sort of think about how you can interact.
Thanks, Chris. There's one more slide in your presentation. Did you feel that you covered it already?
Yeah.
Great. So I open the floor for any questions to Hillary or to Chris. Please raise your hands. You may also write in the chat if you prefer. I'll take the opportunity to ask you one question myself to Hillary. There's more and more organization is being built around the research data management, storage, analysis, sharing, and in particular, of course, in Europe, we have the European Open Science Cloud. How do you see the relationship between the RDA and the EOSC?
Thank you for that question. Yes, definitely there are more when RDA started, we were a bit of a newbie, a new kid on the block, and there weren't that many. We didn't have many people to turn to, and you know, of a similar kind like ourselves. What is great to see is that many other organizations and initiatives have started, which means there's a need. And indeed, if I can say this, RDA was launched with the idea that after 10 years, it could be closed because the work would be done. Sadly, that's not the case. But on another hand, it shows that the people who had the idea behind RDA had great foresight at the time and understood that this was something that needed to happen in the future. In relation to the European Open Science Cloud, of course, well, open science, while never in any of our founding documents, as FAIR wasn't, is obviously fundamental and at the core of what the Research Data Alliance does, right? We enable and wish to enable parts of open science, and we must work with all of these different organizations that are trying to do that, yeah, because we can't do it. I mean, RDA is only a piece of the puzzle, okay? Like EOSC is a piece of the puzzle, and there are other large things. So I think when I gave the example of the Global Research Commons, of course, EOSC is in there. It was one of the organizations, or if you like, the open commons that are helped to give us this, the work, the framework. I think that also, if we believe truly, all of us, that interoperability is fundamental, and we also believe that science is global, then organizations like RDA have a strong and important role when it comes to finding, if you like, these solutions that go beyond geographical borders, or even sometimes help to go beyond geographical borders around the sovereignty aspects and things like that. So I think that work that is done in RDA on a global level can definitely be of support to EOSC, but also it's the opposite, right? That what is happening in Europe, and with all the funding that we have in Europe, that what is happening in Europe around EOSC can be of great value also to other parts of the world. And I talked about, I spent a lot of time last year in Latin America. And I traveled around 9 different countries, and we're building bridges with them as well. And they certainly don't have the same resources, but can do a lot with a lot less than we need perhaps in other parts of the world. So to me, RDA and EOSC have a lot of synergies and complementarity. Like EOSC has a lot to show a case to the world, which I think would make European scientists and researchers work easier. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. To be honest, I don't even know whether it does or not, but you can. Much has been said about EOSC and how difficult it is to understand what it really is and is going to be. We have a question in the chat from Volmar to Chris. How would you say that engaging in the RDA has impacted your professional network or work or career path?
I guess I would go first, but it's just been invaluable. I'd say I got jobs because of because of the network, like I was able to sort of connect with people and get jobs because of it. And I think a lot of these things sort of also sort of transcend, they're like friendships, across boundaries. And so you really are able to sort of connect with people in that sense, that they're familiar with, your work that way, and sort of can connect that way. But as far as like, I think, we've sort of published and done work together globally that I don't know, it's just invaluable. I don't know how to compare it, but like I think Research Data Alliance has just been one of those great resources throughout my career. And I would just say again, resources are hard. Like being able to go to all the RDAs is very difficult. Like only I think probably a handful can probably go all the time because they have, the funding to do that. And I think you can still do this where you sort of attend, because I think I've only attended 2 in-person RDAs, you know, like, so I've been able to form those connections just by two of them. So so that, you know, like, that's just to say that, you know, you can sort of make a lot out of the resources that you have too. So
Thanks, Chris. That's a great success story.
I've also
Arin?
got a question probably for Chris, I'd say. Clearly it's valuable and it seems to engaging in the RDA seems to be, you know, opening new pathways and new networks and getting to know people might lead to new opportunities. But some might be wondering how time consuming is this engaging in one of the working groups, or since it's voluntary, how does it look like in practice? Is it how often do you meet virtually or in person, or how does it look like? I'm wondering.
yeah, that's what I was saying. Be careful, you know, like, there's so many groups to be involved with. I'm not sure I'm the right person to answer this question, because I suffer from this a little bit of being involved with multiple groups. But I think that that's something to keep in mind is, you know, really whittle it down to the things that you value, or that, you know, sort of your own professional development, and then what ties in with your work. And I sort of have this conversation locally at SciLife Lab about, you know, with the colleagues, is that, you know, tie it in with your work, and that it can be invaluable, right? Because I mentioned one example, which is the library carpentry example, is that we sort of teamed up with RDA and, you know, like, did this worldwide initiative, and it really helped with sort of developing material and connections in that network. So I was able to sort of bridge the two interests that way. So connecting it with your own, and you know, that happens in a lot of ways. There's been sort of data policy work that a lot of organizations and publishers and other groups have come together and developed together because they needed it. You know, like, they needed to leverage this global work to do this. So yeah, just try to, you know, keep things sort of manage them in a way. And you know, for instance, one thing that I do too is I don't attend every RDA session, but I look at this is probably something really good to note, is the collaborative notes and the recordings and other things like that. You can sort of go back and sort of reference some things, even though you don't have to attend the session, is that you can sort of keep track of things that way too. And you know, keep sort of that that sort of approach in mind too. So
thanks. Now we are going to move on with two presentations from Swedish colleagues who are involved in the RDA in different ways. And we go first to Volmar Nyberg Åkerström, who is working with the NBIS Data Center. I hope I got that right. Otherwise, you can correct me, Volmar.
Data Management Unit at NBIS.
Thank you. One moment.
Meanwhile, I can just mention that there is actually on RDA's website, there is a directory of all the different types of groups. So that could be worth checking out. I'll put the link in the chat.
Thank you, Arin. Volmar, the floor is yours.
All right, so I'll see if I have gotten the access to progress the slides here. I will send a request if not. Let me see. So I can't seem to progress. No, maybe it works. Yes, it's a bit of a delay. Sorry about that. Very nice to be here. I asked Chris about his experience of having a use from the RDA in his professional life. And I mean, I have a good experience engaging with the RDA, and that leading to both shared activities and avenues for future work and collaborations. what I think the RDA provides, and I don't remember where I actually took these quotes from, but this is kind of the essence that I want to keep through my entire presentation. So the RDA supports volunteers to engage and work together. And what they do is to provide the structure that facilitates these collaborations and engagements to make progress on different topics. And here I've chosen the RDA plenaries as the focal point, since they are this kind of regular place where people really get to meet and showcase the stuff that they've been working on. So it's really a bazaar of different research data solutions, I would say. You have work in progress, looking for people to give input, feedback, and just having discussions on different possible solutions. And then on the other hand, you might have ideas that you think should be something that's a worthwhile effort for the RDA and others to engage together on. And the first plenary that I'm going to use as an example is the first plenary that I attended. So it's in Helsinki in 2019, and I think I met some people from the S&D and Data Access Unit Network at that event. So you usually have more people attending that are nearby of natural reasons and travel grants and things like that. But some common elements that you will find is the breakdown of the different sessions into pathways, so to speak. And these have changed somewhat over time, but roughly kind of you have these issues related to FAIR, things related to infrastructure and people working on data management issues. And then there might be also some working on skills and professional aspects regarding to data management. And one example of a output that I found very useful at the time, and I don't remember if it was already published or in development back then, was this 23 things for research data management. And this was produced by this Libraries for Research Data Interest Group. And at the time I was working at a university library as well. This was also an event, or turned into the topic of an event in the S&D network, which I think was very nice. And there have been several RDA-related events after that. At this plenary, and all plenaries, there are breakout sessions where there are many sessions competing for attention. So you will have several different topics submitted by these 100+ groups that will convene a number of people. And one topic that I found interesting at this plenary was the curating for fair and reproducible data. That was a birds of a feather session proposing creating a new working group and looking at then the session description. You usually have some meeting objectives and a collaborative notes document where the people participating will add useful links, usually links to the presentations and a summary of some of the questions and answers. There's a long history of these notes being taken collaboratively and session proposals turning into working groups that then produce different types of outputs. So the Birds of a Feather session, it turned into this Cure FAIR working group. And then over a number of plenaries, they collaboratively developed and highlighted the results of their shared work. So this resulted in 10 things for curating reproducible and fair research. And the RDA provides this working group structure where you get some checklist for making sure that you have described the work you want to do in a reasonable way, and it's kind of sized enough so you can actually complete it in a reasonable time frame. And then also some mechanisms to highlight the results of the work, which I think also is very useful. Now I don't really know what's happened. Good, Gustav, could you go back to the presentation slides? Yeah, I think maybe I managed to click a link on the presentation slide set or something.
Let me see. I'm going to reshare it.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that's what happened.
Thank you.
One moment. No, please. I need to put the presentation in the presentation mode again, I think. Now you should be able to control it again, Volmar.
Okay, thank you. So let's see. Then I want to go to the next slide. Maybe it's easier if you do the service if this does something goes wrong again. So the next example that I wanted to show is the 20th plenary, and this was in Sweden. So that's why I wanted to highlight it. And here you can see some statistics of the number of global participants, and you will see that since this was in Europe, the vast majority of attendees were also from Europe. Beyond the breakout sessions and the regular program, there's also some more of these kinds of social activities. And tying back to Chris's presentation and also the response to my question, I mean, this is a really nice opportunity to build your professional network. And I think this was an opportunity where I reconnected with Chris from meeting from way back when. And he also joined for this Data-Driven Life Sciences and the RDA co-located event that we had organized together with our partners in Elixir, which is the European node for kind of life science data connections. And this was a nice joint activity with SciLife Lab as well. So you have these opportunities to showcase activities in your disciplines in connection to these plenary events as well. And one of the interesting social activities here was this quiz on which RDA persona you are, which can lead you to understand that there is a lot of ways of engaging with the RDA. Most of the time, I've been a window shopper. I'm a member of, I think, 40 different groups. And it's not like I'm actively engaging with 40 groups at the same time. But I do keep track of updates on the mailing list sometimes. And at the plenaries, I have some interest groups and working groups that I'm a regular at. And at the plenary events, I take the opportunity to provide the feedback that they're asking for. And if they have some outputs, I try to kind of communicate the results to my network to support adoption. At this event, I was also co-chairing for the Life Sciences Data Infrastructures Group. And you can see an outline of the structure of a typical session, having some presentations framing a topic, and then you have a discussion on future activities and work. And some working groups or interest groups, they kind of change their focus over time as well. And in this case, we have the Elixir Bridging Force, which was working on life sciences data, turning into a more broader perspective for connecting life science data infrastructures on a global level. And this happened around the time of this plenary event as well. To summarize, why I engage with the RDA is to find collaborators and also inspiration for solving different problems. You can also think of project activities that you can bring into the RDA to either try to align or get feedback on them. So you have this birds of a feather session format, and if you go together with a number of other global collaborators, you have a good chance of bringing your topic in if it haven't already been solved. And there's quite some diversity in the RDA community. So there will be someone who's struggling with similar challenges as you are. And I mean, while it might be difficult to find someone in Sweden, which is a small country, there is a better opportunity perhaps to find someone working on the same problem on the global scale. And a way of connecting between our organization and the RDA is some recurring reports that we're making with our colleagues in the Elixir Life Science Data Infrastructure Network to report back some of the relevant outputs and learnings from different sessions. And there are reports dating back since, I think, the 4th or 5th plenary, so a total of 18 or so by now. And I think something like this could be in scope for future kind of community collaborations, either on the national or within the DAO network scale, so to speak. So I think that's where I'm gonna stop and hand over to Ida, I think.
Thank you very
Yes.
much, Volmar. Yes, let me introduce you quickly, Ida. So Ida Taberman is a data steward and business developer at the Swedish University of Agricultural Sciences, SLU, and also a domain specialist with the Swedish National Data Service since a number of years. Now you should have control, Ida, of the slides.
Thank you. We should see if this works. Yes, I have this menu. So thank you. I would like to contribute with some RDA engagements from my point of view. And with that said, Gustav has already introduced me, and I'm part of the data management support team located at the library at my university. And today I will talk about my experience from my university, not as an S&D representative, even though I have several hats, as many of you others as well. So my home university does a lot of different research, including environmental monitoring and assessment. We do veterinary science, water resource management, and different stuff and research about fish, for example, and the National Forest Inventory, species observation systems, and so on. And we also have social science aspects of these issues. And we also have many on-site experiments on arable land, in water and in the forest. We have several, but particularly one research vessel to take care of. And we also have several specialized laboratories and so on. And several of these aspects and research that we do it in a collaborative with counterparts worldwide, for example, Asia, South America, and Africa. So in total, it's a really broad interests, but it's also in many sense domain-specific task because, and our researchers are experts in finding international collaborations, as we are the only university in Sweden dealing with these issues in many ways. And I've been at SLU for 15 years, and data management practices has been the common theme throughout this time. And I definitely see RDA as an opportunity in many ways to gain businesses at my university. And if Chris and Volmar has given a bit more overview, I thought about giving some more detailed examples from domains that I represent. So please come along. We'll change the slide. During my first plenary, Volmar already showed some pictures from Helsinki in 2019. I was all new to the RDA businesses, and to navigate, I set focus on sessions about the environment, chemistry, physical samples, agriculture data, and so on. And I choose to highlight one of the interest groups that I found there. It's dealing with physical samples and the best practices. And this is not coordinated in any way, I promise, but I think Volmar already showed these 23 things on research data management. And these, I guess this knowledge was then adopted into the physical samples interest group. So one of the outputs or recommendations, I never learned the differences, but they have adopted that further. And I think that's a really good strength within the RDA, because there are similarities. You find like connections harmonizing within the organization. I try to change to the next slide. And there is also an interesting working group, I think it's called Data Citation. And it's for us really interesting regarding citation of dynamic data, because that's when data change a lot of times, but you still want to make it open. And that's interesting in regard to our environmental monitoring and assessment. And you can find some guidance on that as well. Volmar also showed some pictures from my second plenary in Gothenburg 2023. I started to feel like I knew the organization a little bit more. I also learned about the IGAD, Improving Global Agricultural Data. And it's a community of practice, which Hillary mentioned earlier as well. So it's a global interest group working with issues related to food and agriculture. You can guess what kind of gold mine that is for a university like us. And this group has been around for quite some years and have several outputs and recommendations. But for example, there are some wheat interoperability guidelines. But I also would like to mention in 2022, RDA set some focus on agriculture data, and we're part of a community cross-fertilization workshop. And that was set that was launched to share and discuss challenges and solutions and initiatives managing agriculture data. And with that said, there is a like continuous focus on always keeping up to date with issues. We will try to continue. And during the plenary in Gothenburg, I also learned that they were, the IGAD community had this project on plant pollinator interaction. And that was in like a subset of a large World Fair project. So I tried to locate any data on plant pollinator interactions in Sweden to bring into that project. And some insights from that work was I got some insight how a working group functioned and was operating. And also that RDA is not an isolated thing within RDA, because it's much broader and collaborates with other worldwide organizations and projects. And a small picture. When preparing this presentation, I also found this interest group, the Salmon Research and Monitoring Interest Group. Of course, a really small community globally, but the potential of connecting these people with the people at my university, for example, or supporting staff, I think that the potential of creating something great is really large regarding data management issues. And in the end, I think we might get back to this, but from my point of view, I made some kind of summary of pros and maybe challenges within the RDA. It's really nice that you can choose the level of engagement. You can follow some interest group that you're interested, or like do as Chris does and be really, really active. And I would also like to mention the openness with the notes and recordings and so on. You can get access to a lot of information. I think it's also good if you have a special interest, as I have showed now, but it's also great if you want to build a community around something larger and national or other challenge that we face together. And as mentioned through the RDA, you also learn about other initiatives going on and how it's connected, the World Fair project, for example, but there are so many others. And challenges, maybe the pros and challenges go hand in hand. Maybe you can compare it to a rabbit hole. There is so much good, nice information. It's maybe overwhelming, but there might be some threshold to cross before you kind of get into the organization and learn how it's working and learn about these different tasks and so on. But there are some examples in the chat that you can have as a guidance, for example. That was my last slide.
Thank you very much, Ida. And now we have a few minutes of questions. I'm going to... Here we go. One moment, please. We take a question from Teresa Kisselbach in Umeå. Can you please share what level of excitement and support you encountered at your organization in Sweden about your work in the RDA? Is there possibly an example that some organization took over results of the work of the RDA and not indirectly? So this is a very nice question, I think, about how to bring home the results of an individual person's engagement to their organization. Volmar or Ida, does either of you want to bite on this?
Maybe I can start at least, but the parenthesis there in Sweden, maybe, I mean, the most clear example is within the collaborations we're doing in the EU level collaboration Elixir. And there we've, over time, developed this resource that was from the beginning called biosharing into a more broad repository of research policies, databases, and standards called fair sharing. So, I mean, that is an example of something that originally was for a smaller community that through the RDA we managed to get kind of a wider adoption for, and that has benefited, I mean, both Elixir and those of us using the fair sharing resource. Because, I mean, data and interoperability is ideally not something that should be walled within a single discipline. And having, I mean, for example, the fair sharing going a little bit broader is helpful to us as well. And we are regularly referring to that resource. So I think that would be one example of maybe, I mean, the extension of that work in the RDA, then feeding back to Elixir and then to Sweden.
Thanks, Volmar. Ida, did you want to comment as well?
Yeah, maybe I can try to continue. I think it's a good question, and I also think it's a challenge because I'm supportive staff at the library, and much of the recommendation and outputs that are there are, I think they're really good and could make really useful, like further down in the organization. But maybe I don't have the mandate to like, you should do this, you can do this, but it's hard. And with that said, being part of the support stuff, we also have to prioritize other issues. And yeah, RDA has like been a red thread, but we haven't put like set aside effort to be more active in RDA, even though we could have done that.
Thank you.
Maybe I can comment on once more, by the way. I just noticed the last part of the section. So, I mean, excitement and support for, I mean, maybe that's a bit of a strong word when it comes to data management related activities. I mean, the number of people who are really engaged in that is not that many. And from that small group, there might be one person who's actually responsible for engaging with RDA activities. And then what you do is basically you translate. So these, I think, are the useful things that we should try to bring into our work. And usually, most of the time, it's not all of a deliverable or all of an output. It's, I mean, maybe we can take parts of it to guide some of the activities that we already have. And I don't have any specific examples other than perhaps the 23 things that we discussed when we were kind of planning to organize some of our data support activities. But there are several. I mean, after each plenary, we do this shared reporting for Elixir, and there's multiple of different solutions and outputs that we kind of highlight for the community to look at.
Great. With no further questions to the last speakers, let's move now to the final point on our agenda, which is the panel on ways forward for RDA Sweden. We have 4 eminent panelists, namely Volmar and Ida, who just spoke, and Sverker Holmgren, who is head of the e-commons at Chalmers University and a well-known person in Swedish open science circles. And also we are very happy that Hillary Hanaho is still with us for this part of the meeting and will be in the panel. So I'm going to ask each panelist in turn to reflect on ways forward, how we can foster engagement of Swedish researchers and others in the RDA, and how Swedish organizations can make the best use of RDA outputs and of having staff members that are involved. And I wanted to go first to Sverker, because Sverker is the only panel member who has not yet spoken. And Sverker, if you feel like adding any reflections on the presentations you have heard, please feel free to do so as well.
Yes, so I think this has been a very good event. I mean, we have heard details about how to engage in RDA and also the overall setting. So I think so far this is really, really good. I would like to come with 2 comments maybe. First of all, I think I want to stress again that RDA is an organization that is really built on bottom-up initiatives, and it's built on participation by individuals in groups on a voluntary basis. And that makes it different from many other initiatives. So in many other initiatives, you and you get your funding to do a specific thing. And maybe also the funder as such has some idea about what is going to be done and some policy that is behind this, and even some politics in some cases. And here RDA is special and very valuable, I would say, because we are, I think, lacking this input into the research data world and maybe into research overall from the people that actually do the research. So I think this I want to stress that again. Then a comment on the way forward, and maybe Hillary wants to comment on this special situation also, but I would like to come with one idea about the way forward, and that is, I very much agree with what Ida said and what has been mentioned by others, that it's difficult for one person at the university to get hold of what is RDA doing and then bring that into the organization to actually get adoption of some output, a recommendation or some other output. And this is where I think we need some sort of coordination, maybe is a strong word, but at least information exchange and some but some type of coordination at the national level. And I think this is where S&D can also be very useful, so that we know of who is in what group, who in Sweden is in what group in RDA, and what is really interesting in RDA at the moment. And then from a perspective of a national perspective, for example, S&D then, or the new integrated e-infrastructure that we're supposed to have in Sweden, from that perspective, maybe point to that this is something that we would like to see implemented, perhaps on the national level or as a choice on the local level. So I think that is an important way forward that we don't really have today. We don't have any communication on the national level, what is really going on in RDA. So I think I'll stop there.
Great. Let's pass the ball to Hillary.
Thanks, Gustav. I'd like to follow on from that, because I fully agree with Sverker's comment there about having some sort of organization coordination on a national level. I talked about it in the beginning of the importance to me, what we call regions. Yeah, we call it regions, but I mean they are nations or groups of nations. Is fundamental, because yes, we get the volunteer work in, that's the heart of RDA, but actually it's this coordination, and we have some very good examples of that, like the French, for example. They have quite a significance. So they support RDA. RDA is no longer, we don't have systematic funding, so they support us financially, which is obviously a benefit for us. But really what they do is they coordinate, and they're very strong in translating into French because it's very important for their community, but they know very, very well what's happening on the ground in France, or how RDA can do it, and when it's appropriate for that work to be done through RDA, even though it means doing it in English, even though it means doing it maybe in a slower pace, but that it will benefit their national strategy and their national plan. And they do a similar thing. They pick and choose from those many, many different activities that RDA has. And I fully agree with Ida. I thought she was quite generous to say that we only have one challenge, which is it's a rabbit hole and it's really hard to find information. And we ourselves struggle with actually providing it in the right way, but on the other hand, many times we've been said, but why are you so broad, and why don't you focus on a specific area? But actually, there are organizations that do that, and they do focus on a specific domain and scientific area with whom we try to collaborate, again, to avoid doing things. So I think that, like, fostering the engagement is exactly like that. That's the best way of doing it, is by understanding and coming together. Again, you either get funding from your government to do this, or then it becomes again a volunteer, if you like, effort. And we know that volunteerism is a luxury these days. So the mandate also from the organization, which I'll go back to, is really important. Now, maybe RDA itself, we can help with that to try and make it, because I appreciate what Ida says. Who's the decision maker? How do you ensure that we can get the if you like, have the mandate and take advantage? And sometimes it's just a lack of knowledge, right? It's just not understanding, but having that coordination. So it goes back to that, in my opinion, to what Sverker says. Then there's a kind of an authority, right? To the fact that, yes, this is a legitimate and viable solution, because it comes from an organization that is recognized. And again, I go to say, and the last thing I'd like to say is very important, that I'm fully aware that RDA is not the only player in this field. We are unique in certain ways, and we have our way of contributing towards it. But it's important that we work all together with all the initiatives to ensure that we're actually doing the best for open science and for the organizations that need to benefit from it.
Thanks. I'd like to follow up, Hillary, if I may, with
Yes, sure.
With your broad outlook on how RDA activities are organized in different countries or regions, what models do you see for resourcing or funding RDA work in a national on a national or regional basis? Is it mostly volunteer on a volunteer basis, or are there other funding models around?
Yeah, so we have some different funding models. As I mentioned before, sustainability is a challenge for many infrastructures like ours. So we call ourselves an infrastructure, but we're a soft infrastructure, right? And open science is in a particularly challenging moment. I think it's always been. I mean, every day my job is to juggle these balls to try and find sustainability for an organization that has, if you like, a contribution to give. So we do look a lot at financial sustainability. I think actually that Volmar showed well, if you noted on his slides, he had the business and the work. Yes. And I always in my board presentations, or also many times to the community, I distinguish that, because those two pieces are really important. The business is the operations, and we're a very lean, agile organization, considering what we need to do. But of course, that's just to facilitate the work, which is the heart. And I think we have financial models for both. One is of course, the work can be supported by including it as a piece of activity within a grant or a project that you submit to a funder, be it on a national or an international level, because you say that actually by developing this with your global colleagues around the world, it has more impact and it's more valuable, right? So you can get the effort for that. So that's one way of funding the work. Volmar mentioned about the RDA Tiger project, which finishes at the end of this year, but that's a way in which the European Commission have given funding to support the work of RDA. We also have public-private partnerships. We believe strongly in bringing the private sector to the table. That includes publishers, by the way, but also the Microsofts and the Oracles, and with whom we've had sponsorship agreements, where we allow, if you like, or get money to facilitate activities that are of benefit to the global community, but clearly also to the sponsor that's doing them. The other model of regional engagement is actually, we have a price list, if you like, where countries, and we have many in Europe and across the globe, pay a small amount to the RDA Global to support the operations. But what's most important in that is having in-kind support. So a regional partnership with the global organization is only of benefit if we actually share information inside the work part, okay, so to the community and at large, but also with the business part, right? So we usually have a person who comes, maybe they're part-time or less, and they can highlight to us what's happening in Sweden, and we can then showcase that on a global level. We can obviously offer more opportunities and visibility opportunities. So there are many different models of funding the RDA. Is that?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Very interesting. Let's continue with Volmar.
Well, I think most has been mentioned. I mentioned in the chat that I think looking actively at which activities we think would benefit from a bottom-up style approach of collaborations, and where there is a clear need of a global connection. And I mean, that could be either through EOSC activities are usually organized top-down, and you have funding coming to a consortia of people who kind of have defined some tasks that they would be working on. Some activities might be defined as you go through the work, and some challenges might kind of arise, or you might struggle with where would the outputs of these, the work that we've done in a project actually end up. And then I think finding ways to align with existing group in the RDA is one approach. So finding how does this fit into a wider context, and then perhaps also suggesting if there's a gap in what the RDA has done and what it's working on, maybe that could be a new activity to work on together. I mean, it doesn't have to be EOSC level grants. It could also be activities locally that we can start considering. So this is something that we think is useful for the S&D connected network to work on. But there might then be a need for having some global connections there to get input on, what has been done in relationship to the activities we're taking on, and how do we share and bring this in alignment with the broader community, so we're not building a regional silo, so to speak. So thinking about the RDA and how to leverage the bottom-up structure early on, I think is a good approach.
Thanks. Ida?
Yeah, I think most of most has been said already, but maybe the raise awareness of RDA for researchers in some extent. I don't have a solution for that, but that has to be done somehow. I also think that the RDA is at least quite well known among infrastructures in Sweden. So this also maybe a challenge could be the time that you have and willingness to prioritize the research data management work. At least from my case or from my horizon, there is ongoing operations already, and they have their workflow for data management. And how should you bring in another initiative or another question into the already day-to-day operations?
Great. Is there anyone on the panel who would like to respond again or comment on what the others have said? Sverker?
Just a quick comment there. I think this aspect that was brought up by Volmar, not try to build national silos or local silos, that's very important. Because when you start thinking about a certain aspect of research data management locally at the university, I think you can be pretty sure that that aspect has actually been thought about at the global level within RDA. The difficulty is to find the material. So it is important for all of us to look for this, and maybe we need some sort of coordination then at the national level to help us in searching.
Volmar?
Yeah, so also related to getting individuals to be able to engage with the RDA, both NBIS and Elixir has a long-standing relationship with the RDA already. So getting my foot in there and arguing for engaging RDA activities hasn't really been difficult. So I think maybe finding some ways of opening the door, and if RDA Sweden collectively could find a way of supporting some sort of maybe not for each plenary, but at the regular pace at least, engagement activities to advertise what's going on and opportunities to engage in new activities. So, not everyone has to be engaged in the RDA. I think the plenaries might not be for everyone. You should also consider that, finding a mode of engagement that suits your organization and, you as a person is probably also something that we could try to help with in RDA Sweden. So, sharing the load, minimizing the overwhelmingness of all the activities in the RDA.
What do you think that might look like, Volmar? Do you have any more specific ideas? Would it entail having meetings between Swedish RDA members, or a joint communication platform, or some other kind of tools?
I can mention something that we have been discussing, off and off, on and off, is, for example, to have some sort of meeting regularly leading up to the plenaries for people who are engaged in the RDA to advertise what areas of interest they have and how they intend to engage with the upcoming plenary. And then there might be some others in the community that they could kind of help bridge some activities that they are working on to the RDA activities, or the other way around. So I think that could be a very low-hanging fruit for those already engaged in RDA activities to, I mean, invite others to collaborate through them.
Very nice. I think that's something that we should be looking at. We do have a couple more minutes before the scheduled end of this webinar, if anyone wants to make further comments. Hillary, perhaps?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that because so we had I think it's fairly well known across the globe and the community that we had a particularly challenging year last year with a change in the web platform, which is still, I mean, ongoing, but we're getting there. But what it does provide are these, if you like, communication areas, let's call them like that, like mini websites, for this particular thing. So it's a lightweight, so every country does it in a different way, those that wish to, but you can have a mailing list in an area in which you exchange information, and that's, you know, free and easy to manage if some people decide. So we have, you know, RDA in France, RDA, some do it also in parallel in other ways. But I think that what Volmar mentioned is not like an easy thing to do, even though he says it's a low-hanging fruit, but a very, very valuable one it could be, which is the pre and the post plenary updates, call them what you like. And Volmar has not mentioned it so much, but he's a member of our technical advisory board, a very active member of our technical advisory board, also a group of wonderful experts from across the globe who give a lot more than just, you know, their time and their energy, but they you know, do an awful lot of work behind the scenes for RDA. And they do an amazing, what do you call it, post-plenary report by putting together, if you like, under the pathways and things like that. And I think that this goes a little unnoticed. And it could be, you know, again, a low-hanging fruit, as Volmar says, to look at it or showcase it, have a quick meeting and things like that. So I do believe we also, by the way, have mechanisms like network newsletters and tools that we can actually give you. Yeah, so we can give you a branded MailChimp if you wanted to use it and subscribe all our Swedish members to that. Like, we're willing to do that because we want to make sure that the word gets out to the most people. So I think there are many, many ways in which we get engaged, and RDA, that's our job in the Secretariat, and we would be very happy to do that. So open to all ideas. Oh, and the last little thing before the 1 minute goes is we actually are developing through some funding we've received from the European Union, a knowledge base, which is being developed by a European organization that I'm sure many of you know, DANS, and it will help to, if you like, navigate the rabbit hole of RDA. It's always been a challenge. The mapping, the categorization, the semantics, the ontologies of, you know, because one community has another. So we really hope that this will actually help people find more about the groups, about the communities that are involved, and about the outputs. That should be coming soon, let's say in this first part of the year, first semester.
Thank you so much. And those will be the final remarks, because we are now at the end of our time. So I would like to thank all the speakers and panelists and everyone who has joined our webinar today for this very interesting discussion. And please stay tuned for more work within the RDA Sweden.